Well, here I am on the banks of my favourite venue, the Lancaster Canal. What a beautiful place. Believe it or not, we're only a stone's throw away from the middle of Preston. You wouldn't believe it, would you? I mean, you've only to look up that way, for example, and there's a lovely stone bridge, and the canal, in fact, is full of them. Coming down here, just a little bit further towards me, there's a swing bridge. I think, in fact, it's the only one that's in operation on the canal at this moment in time. And British Waterways have done a marvellous job looking after it. You've only to look at it to see that. I've probably been fishing this place now on and off for about 30 years. And it's my first love. I'll probably drop dead sitting fishing on this place, actually. It's absolutely wonderful. Further down there, just in fact past the boats, there's a basin. And these are what the boats used to turn around in, like all those years ago when the coal barges and the horses used to tread these tow paths. The peg I've chosen today is more the usual sort of peg that you'd expect to find in a match. Just lately it hasn't been that warm, and I thought, well, if I fish opposite a boat, I've got a good chance of catching. I'm going to be using Bloodworm and Joker, and I'm going to be fishing at about 10 metres distance, probably about a foot away from the boat, as you can see. Right, let's have a look at the rigs. Let's put that down. Now then, we'll start at the top with the elastic, for as good a place as any, I think. Now what I'm using here is a number 3's elastic. Now I'll show you what happens. Shock absorber, big fish on, and the elastic takes the strain. I don't know who invented it, but it's an absolutely brilliant idea. And we've all those match anglers, of course, are well into it now. Now coming down to the float, only a small one really, wire stemmed, bristle, top and bottom pole float. Nothing special about it particularly. They can be bought in the shops, and I think I've had this one for a year or two actually now. Anyway, coming down it, you'll notice there's a very, very tiny little shot. It's probably about an 11. All I use that for is that when I've found a depth that I'm either catching at, or if I decide to plumb, it's perfect. That shot goes under the float and I know exactly where I am. Now coming down a style. I use styles, it's simple, I can move them up and down. I can't move little shot up and down, so the thing is about styles, they're not likely to come off. And these are the shot that I will be moving a lot during the course of a match. Going back to that one, of course, which isn't a style, I would only move it once, hence the shot. So coming back further down again, we have two largish styles, a third large style. Pretty well spread out. You'll notice that they are what? 3-4 inches apart, finishing off with a very tiny style, an 8-ounce bottom which is about 10 inches long, and a very, very tiny carbon caster size 26, which I find is absolutely perfect for winter bloodworm fishing. There is another important point actually. You'll notice, well, I don't know whether you can notice or not, but anyway, I don't put any shot on the hook length. I don't even consider a little style on an 8-ounce a good idea, because you're risking damaging that line, and if you hook a big fish, who's to say what might happen next? So anyway, that's rig number 1. Let's look at the other one. Let's put that down. Right, you'll notice straight away that this is heavier. Now what it is this. We're starting fishing on a relatively calm canal. I mean, like I said before, there's no wind at all. But who's to say what's going to happen? I mean, a wind could come along, anything could happen, whereas I've definitely got to start fishing heavier. So I have a slightly different shaped float. Let me tell you before we go any further, I'm not that bothered about what shape a float is, providing it performs well in the water. Canal pole fishing, top and bottom floats, they all work pretty well. It's your shotting and things like that that's important. Anyway, a bigger float, in fact a 4x14. Coming down, we have a bulk shot. That would be necessary if it gets rough to give stability, which is very, very important. I would obviously obtain better control. Below, and we've got the damn, no, it's come off, it just got stuck for a minute there. Below, we have 2 baby styles as drop shot, the same 8-ounce bottom, slightly longer, but it wouldn't matter if that was an inch or two shorter actually. And once again, a size 26 hook, which, as I said before, for winter bloodworm fishing, I find them absolutely perfect. Right, those are my rigs, which I'm going to be using today. So should we look at the general layout? If you're going to get serious in pole fishing or match fishing or any sort of fishing for that matter, it's very important that everything is laid out precisely where it's going to work best for you. As an example, we have the keep net, stuck in at such an angle that, and this is important, that the lip of the net comes just over the bank, so there's no way that if a fish just happened to slip, it can get between there. And as I unhook a fish with my right hand, it's in my left hand, and it's just on my left hand side, ever so convenient. Landing net, similar, always to hand. Just simply, can't miss it really, can you? Perfectly like that. Now then, another bit of interesting equipment are these. Now these are in fact pole cups. In fact, I call them thimbles, because if you look at that one in particular, it's not much bigger than a thimble, is it? Now these clip on to the end of the pole about a foot away from the end. And it's possible in this situation to fill it up with jokers, pass your pole out, empty it, then drop your float on top of it that's obviously baited, and you can fish a sinking bait on top of this stuff that's going down. In fact, it's an excellent method when it's very, very hard in winter. And here, of course, we have some bigger ones of the same sort of thing. Right, those are there. Interesting thing over here. Now this is my main feed cup. And you want to have a look at that. You'll notice it's bigger than the other ones. And it's what I would use to feed initially if, of course, conditions were that adverse, I couldn't get it there by hand. You'll notice that the pole passes through it, and it's arrowdited on it each side. That means that even in a gale, it's not going to come off. Now it does a good job, does this cup actually, and I'll explain why. There's times, and I'm sure a lot of people have noticed this, if you loose feed joker and bloodworm by hand, especially if it's neat, you'll find that certain ones float. Well, that's not a good idea. I mean, in fact, you're wasting bait really, aren't you? Now I find if you wet the inside of the cup and press in the bloodworm and joker and let it go in a ball, it's almost as though you've got clay mixed up with it, because that ball will travel so far before it opens out, and you literally are feeding the bottom of the peg without any additives, which I also think is important. So every pole angler really who's worth his salt is going to have a cup to feed with, so we'll put that down. Now then, the pole itself. You'll notice behind me there's a hole in the hedge. Now that's perfect. Believe me, I didn't make the hole. You must always be very, very careful and always look behind you actually before you start fishing to see where you're going to be threading your pole through. I remember a bloke in Liverpool actually, we're on the banks at Lydiate. Anyway, it's a tale I heard second hand. And this woman were moaning at him and everything else, and then she said, I'm going shopping, and he said, well, we'll do us a favour, love, before you go, leave the back door open, then I can put my pole and like continue fishing. And it's not a good idea to antagonise people like that. So always try and make it so that it's right. Something else I'll show you, a pole rest. Now, not to be used all the time. Most pole anglers are active and they're fishing just, you know, all the time actually. But if you just want to do a little bit of a job, you put the pole in the pole rest, you can pour yourself a brew, you could even be waiting for a big fish. A number of things actually, but the pole rest I find very, very, very useful in certain situations. So we put that back. Now the position of the bait. I mean, I'm right-handed, and if I was going to throw or introduce bait into a cup, this being the joker, I would use my right hand, I would hold a cup in my left hand and put it in. So that's very convenient, it's easily within reach, and as you can see, no problems. The hook bait, when we get it sorted out, will be over here. Once again, it will be on hand, I can reach it without stretching, and job's a good one. Other things that I have scattered about, just in case of accidents. Packets of hooks that I'm likely to be using. Now, if it was raining, obviously I wouldn't be able to do this because these hook boxes are not watertight. I think they make them like that on purpose, actually. So put that down. We have a plummet that's handy, a pair of scissors, and it is gorgeous. That's for obvious reasons, really. If a fish follows the hook, you want to get it out as quickly and safely as possible. Just one other thing that I do have knocking about, and that's a black felt tip. I mean, you never know if a wind just happened to get up. I mean, it's not such a clever background that I've chosen, but if a wind just happened to get up, the orange floats, which I have on at the minute, just might go wrong on me, and I can always turn them black. So that really is the end of the equipment that I have knocking about. So let's have a look at the bait, shall we? Right, this is going to be an out-and-out bloodworm attack. What we're hoping to do is to catch 2 or 3 pounds of smallish fish. You never know, of course, an accident could come along, and if it does, it'll probably be in the shape of a bream, which could be a pound, pound and a half. And it's not unlikely, but small fish is definitely what we're aiming at. Anyway, here we have jokers. Obviously necessary if we're fishing bloodworm. I scraped these yesterday, as a matter of fact. I'm quite prepared to fish with joker that's a day old. No problems at all. Bloodworm, I want them fresh as possible, and I consider that important. So anyway, let's have a look at the bloodworm. They are fresh, these are beautiful. I mean, just look at those. Now what we're going to do in effect is, if you're putting bloodworm on the hook, which we're going to be doing, I don't like feeding just jokers. What I prefer to do is to put at least a reasonable handful of bloodworm in with the jokers, then we are at least introducing something into the peg that we're putting on the hook. I think that's very important. Anyway, let's get on with the fishing, shall we? Right, we'll put a handful of the bloodworm in amongst the joker, mix it in like that, and that's the mix that we're going to be using today. Right, let's get on with it. Now I'm going to fish right up close to that boat, and I'm not going to bother plumbing it, and there's a good reason for that. If there just so happen to be a bream or two there, the last thing in the world I want to do is give it an headache with a plummet. I know the depth basically, at least to within an inch or two, and it's not that critical. So what we're going to do is we're going to pop some bait in exactly where we want it to be and get on with the business. So we connect the World Cup, as Kevin Ashes calls it. We fill it up with the mix. Notice we're feeding an inside peg at the same time. And out we go. There we go, that's one. Now the thing about this cup business, you don't want to be too accurate. In other words, it's not much good putting all your stuff down the same hole. What it enables you to do is put it where you want it to go, and there is a difference, if you see what I mean. So what I'm going to do with this one is just put it in on the same line, but about a metre further down. It's not much good having a shoal of fish confined to such a small area. So what we're going to do, about a yard further down, there we go. Right, that should do the business. So we disconnect the cup and pick up rig number 1, which is the light one that I showed you before. Straight through the head. That is perfect. That is perfect. I expect to get a bite first cast, in fact. So let's put it out. There we go. Brilliant. Straight away. Get it back. A roach. Now then, a first throw fish. Must be sat on them. And the keep net with it. Notice I turned that over to get at the fresh ones. Perfect. Could be in for a good do here, actually. Right. You know, this is my favourite form of fishing, no doubt about it. Holding a pole and catching a fish or two. It's brilliant. I don't know how they sit there looking at quiver tips, and that's the truth. And as for specimen hunters, well, I don't understand them at all. Come on, just ease that bait. Let it go. That's the idea, really. You should lift it up, get some movement in that bloodworm, let it drop down again, and hopefully, not that time, do it again. There we go, fish number 2. I'm starting to enjoy this. Another roach. Just nice handy fish actually, aren't they? By the ounce. You'll get one of those a chuck and with your chance of most matches on here, especially in winter. And actually, we're going to use the disgorger here. It's just took it down that little bit too far. Now this is where you've got to be careful. Nobody hurts fish. So it's a simple operation. Just slip it out like that into the keep net. Okay. Let's get back out there. Let's pretend it's a match. That's the way, isn't it? The currents, or should I say the draws, just pushing that float along a little. If it gets any worse, I might be tempted to either put a little back shot on, about a 10 or a 11 or a 10, just above the float, or even go on. My word, this is a tiddler. Or whatever we're going to say a word, just go on to that slightly heavier rig. Oh, a real tiny roach. Now I'm not going to bother with the cup now because I'm going to fish a 2 in. I'm just going to drop a little ball in with my hand. You'd only do this if you think there's a fish or 2 there. In fact, we'll give them another one just a bit higher up as well. That's perfect. Right. We've definitely got a peg full of fish anyway. Even Mark Downs are catching me. Just leave it and let it go down. Just keep easing that float. There we go. Probably another roach. And it is. You know, they're quite handy fish, those, really. What, half an ounce? I'm afraid I think we're going to have to settle for them. So we'll select another big bloodworm. I'm going to put a few more jokers in, or joker and bloodworm mix, should I say. Not a big ball. You know, we don't want to overdo it. And that is bang on. These small fish are taking this bait on the drop. There's no doubt about that. They wouldn't float to death. Might be an idea to try that heavier one actually. Let's see how we go. Yeah, they're only smaller these. Not really good enough to score in a match fish of this size. Definitely looking for something a bit better. Let's have a do with that heavier rig. Tell you what, first we'll just drop another little ball in. There we go. Now this, remember, is designed to get down more quickly because of the bulk shot, and hopefully down to a bigger fish that might be waiting for us nearer the bottom. Also, we'll put a slightly larger bait on. Instead of just the one bloodworm, we'll go for two. We will when we can get it on the hook. Right, there we go. That is pretty well perfect. See what happens. Out we go. Now you'll notice when this goes in, it will settle, obviously more quickly, and hopefully beat those little fish. Let's see what happens. Just move it as before, draw it up and let it go. And that was an indication. Now that feels a bit better. Let's get it back. Now then, look at this. A bigger daddy. Now those weigh, I mean that's an ounce. Comparing to the little roach, of course, they're like 3/4 of the ounce. So this is definitely progress. In fact, if this were a match and fish like this came every chuck, I'd be definitely fancying my chances. Don't think about it though, when you're catching fish at sort of 10, 11 metres, short lining, you've really got to be quick as you can, without making any mistakes, of course. We're going to go back in as quickly as possible, next to the boat again, let it settle, and straight away. Now this is definitely better. It's amazing, you change your rig, and straight away you're into better fish. In fact, we're going to slip the net under this one. You don't take chances on 26 hooks. Beautiful. Well, a decent sized roach. 3 ounce, something like that. I tell you what, it's an aquarium out there now. Swing the keep net with him. A couple of bloodworms on. This is the bit that takes the time, it really does, because you've got to put them on in such a manner that the fish are going to be interested. You can't just stick them on any old how. Unfortunately, it takes a bit of time. Let's get out there again. Things seem to be quietening down a little bit now. And you're still living hope, but it's getting colder, the sun's starting to drop. There we go. Another small roach. Another small roach. Well, I've had a cracking day of sport. Unbelievable really when you consider the start that we had. So I think now we'll call it a day and let's have a look at what we've caught. Yes. Now then. 4.5 pound I would have thought. What a cracking day's fishing. Absolutely marvellous. Didn't expect it to be as good as this, but it just goes to show you can never tell in fishing what's going to happen. You know, in fact, it's that nice. I've a good mind to continue for an hour. We'll put these back in the canal. Actually, this peg has a little bit of history as far as I'm concerned. In 1986, I won the Silver Star Pole Championships from here. Mind you, that was a nice warm July day, and now we're in the middle of winter. That day, I had nearly 10 pound of bream. Well, today I wouldn't expect any bream, to be quite honest with you, but we might just get a roach or two and maybe a few perch. So let's get tattled up. You wouldn't believe it, while I've been tattling up, it's hailstoned, it's rained, it's done just about everything. I was thinking how unlucky to cop for a day like this. But here we go, the sun's out again, and hopefully we're going to catch a few fish. So, can I get on with showing you the first rig that I'm going to use? Right, let's have a look at this first rig. It is in fact 4 metres to hand. It's a Silver Star pole, as a matter of interest. It's a prototype, and it's working that well for me at the moment. I doubt if I'm going to swap it. So let's start at this end. Got to start at one end or the other, haven't we? Now, most people, when they start talking about lines to hand, they're talking about flick tips. Now, on this particular canal, I always use elastic, and there's a good reason for that. It's simple, there's some big fish in here. There's perch up to a pound, even bigger than that, and certainly a roach of a similar size. Now, on a flick tip, when you're using light lines, such as 8 and 12 ounce, I wouldn't be very confident in landing those fish. So I always use an elastic. It is just an insurance policy, really. So, as we come down and we look at the float, it's in fact a waggler. Now, the float is made of peacock. At this end here, we have a needle, and at the other end a bristle. It's amazing, actually, just how much shot this float takes for its size. You'll also notice it's locked with 1 or 2 small shot round here, round the base of the float. And as we move down, you will also notice that there are stile leads. Now, I use stiles for a good reason. You can in fact move stiles up and down, no problems at all, whereas with round shot, I'm sure you've all realised, they do tend to drop off now and again. Like I say, stiles generally will stay there for you. As we move down, you'll notice, as I was saying, that these stiles, should we say, they're rather more concentrated at the top, and that is to give this float stability. In fact, what it does, that effectively makes that little float sort of that long when it's in the water because of the closeness of those shots. As we move down, you'll notice that the stiles, although the same size for the time being, are more spaced out. Now we're starting about talking fishing on the drop for these big fish that we're hoping to catch. So we come down the rig as we do, and you'll notice also that as we begin to finish off, the stiles are starting to get smaller, and eventually we're finishing off with 2 very, very, very tiny ones. And also you'll notice quite a drop to the hook, something like 15 inches. This is in fact to give this bait a natural presentation that is very, very, very necessary to fool these bigger fish, which is hopefully what we're going to catch. The hook length is 8 ounce, and the hook is a 26's Drennan carbon caster, and I've had no problems with those at all over the years. So anyway, that's that rig. So let's put this one down and have a look at the other rig. Right, let's have a look at the second rig. This in fact is going to be our main attack today. It's going to involve caster as bait, and as you can see, it's a short line pole rig. We're going to be fishing it about 11 metres out, which is something like 2/3 the way across the canal. So let's have a look at it. Once again, it involves elastic, but slightly heavier than the last one. This is a number 4, as the last one was a number 3, and I'll tell you why later. Moving down to the float. Now that is just an ordinary top and bottom wire stem bristle float which can be bought in any tattle shop. It is in fact a 4x12, and I would imagine in the 4.5, 5 foot of water that we're going to encounter here, it'll work perfectly well. Difference again, we have a bulk shot. That's because of the depth. If the canal was say only 2 or 3 foot deep, I'd probably have light shots strung out as before. But on this occasion, as I say, it's slightly deeper. I much prefer some bulk, something like 2/3 of the way down. Moving on, we just have one little drop shot, which is in fact a number 10 there. Now the hook length is the same as before, it's 8 ounce. The hook is different. The hook is a size 22s, if I can just show you. There we go, a size 22s, once again a carbon caster. Now I was saying before I was using heavier elastic. The reason is I'm using a bigger hook. I wouldn't have a lot of faith in setting a 22s hook with a number 3s elastic. So we use a number 4s elastic, a 22s hook, and hopefully we'll catch what we hook. Right, that's the rigs sorted out. Let me just mention something before we go any further actually. Pole fishing is my favourite aspect of the sport, no doubt about it. One thing we must all be careful of, and that is the electric wires that sometimes pass above us. Most match organisers these days recognise the fact and they leave them out. But always be on your guard. And I have heard in fact that the NFA in conjunction with Swan Vesta have made a brand new sign that you just can't miss. So keep your eyes open for it and let's be safe. Right then, let's have a look at the bait, should we? Right, the first thing we're going to look at are the jokers. Nothing particularly special, I'm sure you've all seen jokers before. In fact, I will show you some. And there we are, jokers, lovely and fresh, probably scraped sometime yesterday afternoon, looking absolutely marvellous. Now these do differ slightly from some people's jokers that I've seen. You'll notice that they've still got all the bits of grass and all the different things that go through the riddle are still there. I don't bother riddling mine through again and again and again. Every time you riddle them through, you lose some. And there's also another good reason. There's no additives in there, there's no clay, there's nothing. I can quite simply give it a squeeze and make a ball. I can put that across the canal if I like. That's far better than the way some people do it. As I was saying before, if they're too clean, you can't make a ball out of them, you can't feed them. It's just common sense, really. So, let's have a look at the bloodworm, should we? Right, bloodworm. I will show you them. Beautiful looking things. In fact, these are quite big ones, actually. Should catch some fish on these. Now, once again, I do it differently than a lot of people. I keep mine in water. If I was using rabbits on the hook, I wouldn't keep them in water, I'd have them on dry land because that's where they'd want to be, that is where they live. Bloodworm live in water, keep them in water. It's what they want, and believe me, it keeps them a lot better than having them in black soot or peat or whatever else that people generally put them in. So I hope you've learned something there, actually. Right, let's have a look at the casters, which are going to be the main bait today. No secrets here at all. Very, very fresh. I wouldn't have them any other way. Some people seem to get away with them a week old, but I'm afraid I can't. Now what I do in fact here is this. For on the hook, I want floaters. And you buy your casters from the shop and you're always going to get some floaters on the top. I mean, looking at those there's probably 40 or 50 that are definitely floating. And more important, they are the same colour. If you leave them to go off and float naturally without having them in water sort of thing, they will darken up. I want to use casters that float, that are the same colour as the ones that I'm feeding. This is how I do it. Now those, the ones that came off, are the floaters. That's my hook bait. Right, that covers the bait. Let's plumb up. can I just make a point about the plummet actually? Rather different than the ones you buy. All this is a piece of wrapped round lead with a sponge in. Now the reason for this, I just tip the hook there into the sponge, like so. The thing about this is, while I'm plumbing up, if I get stuck with the plummet and I pull for a break, 90% of the time the hook will rip out of the sponge and we don't lose our tattle. It's a good point that actually. Now that's about 4 meters to hand there. And that is in fact just off the bottom. Now it's only where secondary attack is this really, and I'm not going to bother getting it absolutely perfect. In fact, some people maul about with plummets for so long, I'm sure that every fish in the peg just disappears. You want to make plumbing simple, make it quick. Now we'll plumb the other line. Now I would imagine it's going to be something like 4.5 stroke 5 foot deep on that 2/3 line. I've already set this accordingly. In fact, if I could think back to when I actually fished here that other July, I'd know for certain, wouldn't I? You know, we're losing pieces of pole here, we are. Now what we'll do here is we'll drop it right in the middle where no danger, it's going to be the deepest. And that, remember, it's not that bad, is it? That is more or less the depth. So let's just work it out. Don't want to take too long over this, but I've still got to get it right. This is the important line. What I'm going to do is find out how far that depth will last. Now you'll notice it's just starting to come up. And that's it. So now I've found the crook of that deep water. That is where the depth starts to come back up again. And it's in the crook of that peg we're going to fish. Right, we're going to start off with the bloodworm. On the near side, we know how deep it is now. We're just going to cast in to get it absolutely right. That is that. And quite simply just put in a couple little balls of jokers. You'll notice that when I feed this float, I'm going to try and feed it just this side of it, because the depth will continue to be going. And whatever doesn't get eaten, if you like, I want it to find its way to the deeper water. If I feed too far, I feel as though I'm doing it wrong. So we'll just put a couple of those in there. And we'll pull this out. And we'll feed the far line. Right, what I'm going to do here in fact is this. I'm just going to put one little cup of joker on that caster line. I feel that the joker just activates the fish and just gets them cracking that little bit sooner than if I was just feeding casters alone. I mean, there are good anglers that come on this canal and just simply fish caster on its own, and they do quite well. But I mean, I feel as though this is the best way, so this is the way I'm going to do it. It's just 1/2 cup of joker on that caster line. And the cup, although we can throw it, let's get it bang on, should we? It's a great method, this, in the wind. In fact, there's been the odd occasion I've fed the middle of the canal instead of where I want, but anyway. Right. That's perfect. Just enough to get those fish activated, we hope. So we'll take that off. We'll just put a couple of poucher casters, not pouch fulls, remember it is winter. There's about 15, perhaps 16 casters there. On more or less the same line. I'm not bothered about the fact that they spread out a little bit. I'm not going to say I did it on purpose, I'm just saying I'm not bothered about it. Now that's great. I would say there we probably put, I don't know, 25, perhaps 30 casters. Now I'm going to leave that and I'm going to start fishing this inside line. And hopefully we'll catch a little perch or two, perhaps even a big perch or two, who's to say? Right, while we're at this, let's show you how to hook a bloodworm. The one I want is that one there, on the end of my thumb. It's a beautiful looking bait, and I expect to catch a fish on it. So let's put it on the hook, shall we? Straight through its head, making as least mess as possible. That's there. And that is absolutely perfect. In fact, I could eat that myself. There. Right, let's see how we go. All the time we've got to remember that this isn't the main peg. The main peg is, of course, across there. I mean, all we're doing now is waiting for the bigger fish, hopefully, to settle on those casters and that bit of joker that we put in. And it'll take quarter of an hour, 20 minutes to get that peg established. So we can grab an ounce or two on the near side, all well and good. And you never know, you could get an odd bonus. So let's just see how we go. Actually, that float's holding up perfectly. Just keep flicking the end. That actually was a bite. And I am afraid, like an idiot, missed it. Now, the one thing we always do when we're bloodworm fishing, if you miss a bite on a bloodworm, always change your bait. The number of times I see people, they'll miss a bite and go straight back in again. And it's false economy, is that. They think they're being fast, but they're not. The odds are, if you've missed a bite on a bloodworm, you'll miss the next bite too if you don't change it. So let's make sure we do it properly. There we go. You'll notice that when I cast in on this waggler, I draw the pole back, and that's to sink the line, of course. There we go, a little perch. Not bad, second choke. It just could be one or two of those there, actually. Anyway, let's get it in unhooked and put it in the net. Right, I'll tell you what we're going to do now. We'll just stick another bloodworm on. Do you know, when there's small perch about like that, there's usually a few of them. And actually, what you want actually is a small bloodworm. Now that might be too big, but anyway, we'll give it a go. And let's put a caster or two in across there. Don't forget that is still the main peg. Just let them settle. Just keep moving that flow. Perch love a moving bait. Now then, that loops. There we go. There we go. Another one. It must be solid. Even Mark Downs are catching me. Right, another bloodworm on. Get it absolutely perfect. That's it. And back in we go. I'll tell you what, we'll just put a couple more jokers in there actually. It looks like there's 1 or 2 fish here. Notice I'm feeding it short all the time. And you never know, there might be a roach or 2 as well to follow, who's to say. In fact, to win a match on this canal in winter time, you need roach really. Although lately it hasn't been fishing as well as what it can do. But usually 3 or 4 decent roach on the caster and say a dozen of these perch on the bloodworm and you've a couple of pound, and that's been enough lately actually. Of course, summertime it's totally different. That's when there's always bream present, and like I said, the last time I fished this particular peg I had nearly 10 pound. Don't really think that's going to happen today. Well, you know, we bumped that one actually. But always remember, change that bloodworm. I'm trying to look for one now actually, it's not too big. There we go. You know, it's so easy to see the float when the sun's on it and the sun just disappears for a minute or 2 and it becomes quite difficult. Just keep moving the tip. So what we'll do, we'll just shallow up a little bit actually. Just an inch or 2. Right. They're not a bottom feeder, a perch really. They're a hunter, big eyes, looking up all the time, a little like a pike. And sometimes you can get a better perch in mid-water. When I say that, sort of 4, 5, 6 inches off the bottom. Let's just see how we go here. I'll tell you what, a few more jokers wouldn't go amiss, I don't think. Once again, we'll feed it short. Just 1 or 2 more as well. Just a bit further than that. There we go. Now this feels a little better. Yes. Go on then, we'll pretend it's a match and we'll net it. Lovely. A perch once again. There we go. 2.5 ounce, something like that. Absolutely brilliant. Beautiful fish. Get it in the net. Oh, they're getting smaller now, look at that. Not much bigger than a stittleback really, is it? Mind you, they all count. Let's get it in the net. You know, that reminds me actually, it's not that many years ago, whereas all you would have caught here was sticklebacks. I mean, they were terribly polluted, these inner city canals, and it's amazing really just how good they are now by comparison. Marvellous fisheries really. In fact, I don't know of anything to beat this particular one. Anyway, let's have a go on that caster peg now. I'm sure there must be something waiting for us. Now you see, we're using a 22s hook, and that's why we're going to put a floating caster on. And between the 2 of them, they should be just about right. We're going to bury the hook in the caster actually, because we don't want it to show. Right then. Now this first chuck is always the important one. If you're on it, it will go more or less straight away. Now that, my word, now that did look like a bite. Let's have a look at it. Now you'll notice here just how easy it is to put the pole back actually, but it's one thing that you've really got to keep your eye on. Just let's have a look at this caster first. Oh my word, yes. Now then, look at that. Don't show Dick Clegg, please. Right, we'll get another caster on. In fact, let me show you exactly how to put one on. There is a thick end and a thin end, I mean a head and a tail, as everybody knows, so we insert the point of the hook in the thick end like that. We turn it round and we put it in with the thumbnail. Now that renders the hook invisible, which is what we're looking for, of course, to fool these fish. So let's get out there again and see if we can get a bite, or another bite, should I say. Right. Now another interesting point you'll notice, I hold my pole like that, with the elbow straight, the hand there, as so. And that is just as a guide really, but the striking is always done with that, you know, point of interest. Now there are some people, of course, that prefer to hold it like that. Now there's a good reason why I don't. It's simple, because by holding it like that, I immediately gain about 12 or 15 inches of pole. And I might as well have them really, mightn't I? So always hold it in this manner. You notice it's starting to rain a little bit now as well. These clouds are coming over and then the sun's coming out and then it's cloudy. We don't know where we are today, we don't. I just hope these fish realise where they are. There we go, hang on a minute. Yes. Now then, this is better. It could be a roach, I must be honest. Let's have a look. Look at this weather now, eh? Notice I always tuck the pole under the net there. A perch, and a nice one at that. Certainly net this rascal. Come on. There we go. Look at this. A beautiful fish. Now look at him. Or her as it is actually, look. Spawning, would you believe? Just shows how prolific these waters are, doesn't it? And it makes a mockery of the so-called close season in a way. I mean, here we are, middle of February, and we have a perch ready for spawning. What a beautiful fish. Gorgeous. Put it in the net. And put another caster on. Now, I'm not going to put any more casters in out there, actually, just at the moment, because I think, considering the fact that there's no roach showing, I mean, you don't usually get a lot of these perch together. I'm just going to continue fishing on what we've already put in and see if we can get another. In fact, this weather, honestly, it's squalls and gusts and clouds and hailstones, and then the sun's out. I can't believe it. You know, you'll notice all the time I'm fishing, there's quite a bit of movement in this pole, actually. And they tell me in the shops that people come in, and if they're not as stiff as a board, they don't want to know. Well, honestly, I'd hate to have a pole that was too stiff. I'd much prefer one that has that little bit of end action, as you can see, and works much better for me anyway. That's why I still start getting this one back. Now that is a bite. Oh, now this is better. Look at this. You notice that elastic, it's not coming out that much, but there again, it's not supposed to do, but the tip's going round and it's acting as a perfect shock absorber. Just look. Now then. You know, I do believe it's another perch, to be quite honest. I'll tell you something, there's a lot of activity knocking about round here. I think the local factory must have chucked out or something. Anyway, let us concentrate on catching this, should we? Yes, a perch indeed. Look at this. Come on, sunshine. There we go. Gorgeous. A little bigger than the last one, or the last one but two, or whatever it was. Just look at that. And bloated, full of spawn again. Crikey, there's going to be a perch explosion on this canal in the next year or two. If they're all like this. A gorgeous fish. 9, 10 ounce, I would have thought. Look at that. Beautiful. Been caught before as well, I noticed. Anyway, let's get her in the net. Well, I'll tell you what, the light's certainly fading now, and it's getting cold too. And we've certainly had all the elements during the course of today. I think actually we'll just try and get another one and we'll call it a day. And having said that, I have to get a bite first. Hang on a minute, there we go. Oh well, this isn't so big. Here we go. Well, my word, would you believe it? A perch. You know, that must be the smallest perch I have ever caught on caster in my life. Incredible. Well, I think it's time to call it a day, actually. I won't be able to see me float if I carry on much longer. Well, that wasn't bad, was it? We caught a few fish. It was just a shame that we didn't get that odd bigger roach or two that we were really looking for. But there again, with 3.5, 4 pounder perch, and on a winter's day, you can't really beat that. I think this inner city fishing is really coming on, and British Waterways are doing an excellent job in preserving it the way that they are. Anyway, as you can see, the weather's getting absolutely diabolical, and I'm going to get going before the rush hour starts.